She bought lunch for a stranger with her last dollar, unaware he was the new CEO she's interviewing. It was a late autumn morning in Chicago, the kind that makes the wind feel sharper and the sidewalks feel colder. Gray skies hung low over the city, and leaves swirled like forgotten papers down quiet streets. At the corner of 8th and Monroe, traffic lights blinked through the drizzle, and the smell of roasted peanuts from a nearby vendor barely cut through the chill. Standing at the crosswalk, Ava Carter, 29, pulled her thrift store coat tighter across her frame. Her boots had thin soles. She felt every bump in the pavement beneath her. Tucked under one arm was a plastic sleeve containing 3 copies of her resume. Now slightly damp at the corners. The ink hadn't smudged yet, but it would if the rain picked up again. She had $5.03 left in her pocket, not in her account, in the world. And that had to last her until the end of the week. As she waited for the light to change, her stomach growled. Loud. She hadn't eaten since yesterday's shift at the community library, an under-the-table gig she was lucky to get. But there was no time to think about food. She had an interview in 40 minutes, and just enough for either a bus ride or a bagel, not both. That's when she saw him. Across the street near a brick sandwich shop, a man stumbled on a patch of slick concrete. He landed hard. A paper lunch bag burst beside him, sandwich-ruined drink rolling into the gutter. His jeans were soaked, and he winced, grabbing his elbow. People walked past him, fast, like he was invisible. Ava didn't. Without thinking, she crossed through the slowing traffic and knelt beside him. "Hey, you okay?" He looked up, startled. Mid-40s maybe, graying hair under a baseball cap, olive windbreaker stained with what looked like old coffee. "I think so," he said, embarrassed. "You sure?" she asked, helping him to his feet. He tried to smile, brushing gravel from his hands. "Yeah, just my lunch didn't make it." She looked down at the squash sandwich, the cracked water bottle. Ava turned without a word and stepped into the sandwich shop behind them. He called out after her, "Wait, you don't have to." But she was already inside. 5 minutes later, she came out with a fresh turkey sandwich and a sealed water bottle. Nothing fancy, no chips, no dessert, just enough. He blinked. "Ma'am, I can't take that from you." "You can," she said with a small smile. "No strings. Just eat something warm today." She placed the food in his hands like she was handing him a priceless artifact. Her smile didn't waver, even though her wallet was now almost completely empty. He stared at her, still not quite believing it. "Why?" Ava paused. "Because I've been where you are," she said quietly. "And because no one should have to face a hard day on an empty stomach." Before he could say anything else, she nodded, turned, and walked down the block toward the subway station. Her path soaked her stomach, still aching. If she had looked back even once, she might have seen the man watching her walk away, his sandwich still untouched in his hands, his expression unreadable, somewhere between surprise, regret, and something softer. But Ava didn't look back. She never did. The next morning broke clear and cold. Sunlight glanced off the downtown skyline, turning high-rise windows into sheets of gold. Ava Carter stood outside the steel and glass tower that housed Stratus Dynamics, one of the fastest-growing cloud technology firms in the Midwest. She stared up at the shimmering structure, her breath fogging in the crisp air. This was it, the interview. One shot at a stable job. One chance to finally rebuild after years of rejection and part-time hustles. She'd memorized her elevator pitch, brushed lint from her blazer, and touched up her makeup, using the reflection in a bus window. Inside the lobby gleamed polished marble floors, sleek receptionist desks, glass panels etched with geometric logos. Professionals passed her with sharp suits and sharper glances, Bluetooth earpieces flashing like status symbols. She approached the reception desk, her voice even but soft. "Hi, Ava Carter. I'm here for a 10:00 a.m. interview." The receptionist scanned the list, nodded. "Welcome. You'll be meeting with the selection panel on the 23rd floor. Take the elevator behind you." Ava thanked her and stepped into the waiting elevator. As the doors slid closed, she caught a glimpse of herself in the reflective metal-tired eyes, damp curls pulled into a low twist, and that same plastic sleeve of resumes tucked against her side like armor. The ride was silent except for the soft chime announcing each floor. Her thoughts ran wild. What if they Google her name? What if they ask about the gap in her resume? What if today's another no? The elevator opened into a bright hallway, thick carpet muffling her steps. A polished plaque read, Executive Interview Suite A. She entered the waiting area, glass-walled minimalist. 3 other candidates were already there, all polished to a shine. One wore Italian leather shoes. Another had a tablet and scrolled through what looked like a pre-built portfolio website. A woman with red nails applied a touch of gloss, her resume printed on ivory linen. Ava swallowed hard and sat down on the far end of the bench. She adjusted the cuffs of her thrifted blazer, silently hoping the hem didn't show the hand stitching she'd done last night. But across the hall, someone had already seen her. Behind tinted glass, in a smaller adjacent office, a man stood watching. He was dressed in a tailored charcoal gray jacket, posture relaxed but alert. His features were sharp but not cold, weathered by experience more than age. His eyes locked on Ava, though she hadn't noticed him at all. His name was Jack Rylan, and he was the new CEO of Stratus Dynamics. And he recognized her instantly. The sandwich, the windbreaker, the quiet kindness on the street corner. She hadn't known who he was, hadn't asked for his name, hadn't waited to be thanked. Now, here she was again, hair pulled back, shoulders squared, wallet likely still empty, and she had no idea the man she'd fed was about to sit in judgment. Jack remained still. His fingers hovered near a stack of interview packets, but he didn't reach for them. He didn't speak to the assistant outside his door. Instead, he simply watched as Ava sat in silence, her fingers tugging nervously at the corner of her resume. He remembered how she'd helped him without hesitation. No agenda, no pitch, just a human helping another human. That moment had stayed with him longer than he expected, but he never thought he'd see her again. Especially not here. Not today. He stepped back from the window, heart heavier than he liked to admit. She was a candidate now, a potential hire, and he couldn't let a sandwich sway policy. Or could he? Jack leaned over and pressed a quiet button on the intercom. Delay panel A's schedule by 10 minutes, he said. Tell HR, I want to observe the interviews directly. The assistant's voice replied surprised but composed. Yes, Mr. Rylan. He turned once more to look at Ava. She still hadn't noticed him, but she would, not yet, not now, but soon. And this time, he wouldn't be the one needing help. The conference room was cold, not in temperature, but in tone. Sterile walls, impersonal furniture, and the kind of lighting that made everyone look slightly paler than they were. Ava Carter stepped inside, with cautious resolve, her worn leather folder held tightly to her chest. She greeted the panel of 3 with a quiet, "Good morning," her voice steady, but low. Seated at the sleek table were 3 people: Marla Quinn, Director of Human Resources, with a reputation for fairness but little warmth; Neil Archer, Head of Development, a data-driven man with no tolerance for fluff; and Leslie Tran, Legal Advisor, whose sharp eyes missed nothing. They welcomed her with polite nods and invited her to sit. For the first 10 minutes, the conversation was comfortable. They asked about her certifications, her experience tutoring coding to underserved teens, her passion for systems integrity. Ava answered honestly, never overselling, never embellishing. Then came the shift. Marla set her tablet down. We reviewed your resume, Ava, and it's quite solid. But we also ran a background check as is standard for our company. Ava's heart skipped a beat. She nodded once. Yes, I expected that. Leslie leaned forward. There's a record of a conviction from 2018, financial misrepresentation at a small analytics startup. 2 years served. Neil crossed his arms. Marla's lips pressed into a thin line. The room quieted. Ava didn't look down, didn't flinch. She met their eyes and spoke. I was 25. I was working at a startup run by someone I trusted, my boyfriend at the time. He had access to everything but needed someone with clearance to approve certain transfers. I signed things I didn't fully understand. She paused, but not to gather courage, only to let the weight of the words settle. When the money went missing and the investigation started, he vanished. I was the only name on the documents. Silence. Even Neil stopped twirling his pen. I didn't have the money for a strong attorney, and I didn't have the kind of family who could rally behind me in court. I pleaded guilty because I didn't see another way. Her voice remained calm, but her hands gripped the edge of the folder just a bit tighter. In prison, I earned a programming certification. I worked in the library. I stayed out of trouble. When I got out, I waited tables and rebuilt piece by piece. I taught code at the community center because I wanted to use what I knew to give something back. Leslie shifted in her chair, arms crossed now, not in challenge, but in thought. Marla looked down at her notepad, tapping a pen once, twice. Neil finally spoke. You understand this company handles sensitive data. Our clients are high profile. If anything happens, even a whisper of scandal. I do, Ava said gently. And I understand the weight of trust. I lost mine once. I've spent every day since then earning it back, even when no one was watching. There it was again, that quiet force. Not defiance, not begging, just truth. Unvarnished, undeniable. Outside the tinted glass wall, Jack Ryland watched from a side room, his arms folded, eyes fixed on Ava. He had insisted on silent observation, but every instinct in him wanted to step in. Still, he didn't. Not yet. Inside the room, Ava added one final sentence. I'm not asking for a favor. I'm asking for a chance to show you that I'm not my worst mistake. I'm what came after. The room went still. Marla finally looked up. Thank you for your honesty. Neil gave a polite nod. Leslie didn't speak, but she looked at Ava with a subtle shift. Less judgment, more curiosity. The interview ended shortly after. They told her they'd be in touch. Ava smiled, thanked them, and left the room with the same quiet strength she'd walked in with. But she knew? She'd heard that phrase before. We'll be in touch. It was polite code for no. Still, her back remained straight as she walked past the waiting area. The other candidates didn't meet her eyes. She didn't expect them to. Downstairs, she stepped out into the cool air. The sky was turning gray again, and the wind had picked up. She stood beneath the building's overhang, digging into her coat pocket. Bus fare, just enough. As she waited, she stared out at the street. Not bitter, not broken, just quiet, just waiting. And several floors above her, Jack Ryland stood at his office window, watching her silhouette. The same woman who'd handed him a sandwich with no name, no expectation. Just a simple, tired smile. He pressed a button on his desk intercom. Put a hold on candidate Carter's file, he said, and pull the full court transcript from 2018. I want every detail. Yes, Mr. Ryland, came the assistant's voice. Jack exhaled slowly, his hand resting on the empty sandwich wrapper, still in his desk drawer. He wasn't sure where this was going, but he knew it wasn't over. Not yet. A night had fallen by the time Jack Ryland sat back at his desk, the Chicago skyline glowing like a circuit board beyond his office windows. From this height, the city felt both immense and small. Busy streets reduced to glimmering veins, people like scattered pixels. But tonight none of it held his attention. On his desk lay a folder, thicker than before. Inside were the full court records from 2018 police statements, plea deal, transcripts, public defender notes, and a photo of Ava Carter taken during her booking. In it, she looked impossibly young, scared, shoulders hunched. But her eyes, those hadn't changed. Jack had watched her all day. He'd reviewed the interview footage twice, not just to assess her skills, but to study her silence. The way she listened, the way she didn't deflect, didn't justify, didn't crumble when faced with suspicion. She just stood there, telling the truth, as if that was all she had left. He opened the transcript again. Ava's ex-boyfriend Jason Merrow had been under investigation in 2 other financial fraud cases, all dropped due to insufficient evidence. In each case, his name disappeared. The women connected to him had not been so lucky. Ava had signed documents he'd prepared never knowing she was authorizing illegal transfers. She hadn't understood the financial instruments. She'd trusted him. And when the time came, he vanished. She didn't. Jack leaned back in his chair and rubbed the bridge of his nose. It was worse than he thought. She hadn't just made a mistake. She'd been failed by the system, and no one had tried to fix it. Until now, he glanced at the photo again. Blonde curls pulled into a ponytail, that same calm smile that almost didn't fit the story underneath. There was a knock at the door. It was Sarah Miles, his chief of staff. You wanted an update, she asked. Jack nodded. What's the consensus from the hiring panel? She hesitated. Mixed. HR's open. Legal's hesitant. Dev team says she's qualified, but worried about optics. He gave a faint nod. Of course they are. Sarah tilted her head. You're considering her. I'm doing more than that, he said quietly. Sarah stepped forward. Jack, you know how this looks? You can't base a company decision on one moment of kindness. He looked up at her. That's not what I'm doing. She folded her arms. Then what are you doing? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned his chair slightly, looking back out at the city. I've spent the last 6 months listening to investors talk about innovation, expansion, and market dominance, he said. But no one talks about character, about the people behind the data. I'm tired of pretending that our biggest asset is just code. He paused. That woman gave away her last dollar to feed someone she thought was homeless. She didn't know my name, didn't care. She just saw someone who needed help, and that's what makes her different. Sarah was quiet. Jack continued. You know what I saw in that interview room today? Not a liability, not a convict, a leader. One who already knows how to carry weight most people wouldn't survive. Sarah softened. And what now? Jack stood. Now I call a meeting. The next morning, the hiring committee gathered in executive conference room thought of 12, a space usually reserved for quarterly forecasts or investor prep. They didn't know why they were there. Legal, HR, Dev, Sarah, a few others. Papers spread across the table. Resume, background checks, digital portfolios. But in the middle of it all sat something unusual, a flattened, empty sandwich wrapper. People glanced at each other, then at Jack as he entered. No jacket, sleeves rolled, expression unreadable. He walked straight to the center of the table and tapped the wrapper gently with 2 fingers. Before anyone could speak, he began. 3 days ago, he said, I slipped outside a deli, wet sidewalk. I hit the pavement. My lunch hit the gutter. A few eyebrows rose. People passed. Nobody stopped, except one person. He looked around the table. She walked out of that store 5 minutes later with a sandwich and a bottle of water. I checked. Cost her nearly everything she had. And she handed it to me like it was nothing. Like feeding a stranger was just what you do. Recognition flickered in a few faces. That person was Ava Carter. Jack said she didn't know who I was. She didn't ask. She just helped. He paused, letting the room absorb it. When I watched her interview, I saw someone who carried her past like armor, not shame. She told us everything. Didn't hide, didn't beg. Legal counsel shifted. Mr. Rylan, we still have to consider perception. Our clients. Perception. Jack repeated. Is something we define? He walked slowly to the head of the table. If we say redemption matters, it does. If we hire based on resilience, not just perfection, people will follow. This company doesn't write code. It builds trust. And trust means giving people space to prove they have changed. He took a breath. As of today, we're launching a pilot program called the Restart Initiative, a path for qualified candidates with criminal records who have demonstrated rehabilitation, accountability, and growth. His voice was calm, steady. Ava Carter will be our first. Silence filled the room. Until Neil the dev lead leaned back and said softly, she starts Monday. Jack smiled faintly. She starts Monday. And with that, he left the room, the sandwich wrapper still resting at the center of the table, like a quiet reminder. Sometimes the smallest act leaves the deepest imprint. The buzz in the Stratus Dynamics offices on Monday morning felt different, like something unspoken had shifted, not dramatically, not publicly, but in the air and the way people glanced over their coffee cups or paused near the HR bulletin board. Ava Carter stepped into the building with a new employee badge clipped to her lapel and a modest leather bag slung over her shoulder. Her shoes were still scuffed. Her resume hadn't changed, but her posture had. She wasn't walking in as an applicant anymore. She was walking in as a hire. Still, it didn't feel like victory. The stares started almost immediately. Not cruel, just curious. Whispered conversations near the elevators, glances exchanged in the break room. A few colleagues offered tight smiles. Others avoided eye contact. Everyone knew. Ava wasn't just the new hire from the Restart Initiative. She was the one with a past. She could feel the label pressing against her back like a shadow. Her desk sat in the open concept workspace of the data integration team, a modest space tucked between 2 high-energy engineers who barely looked up as she arrived. She didn't mind. She unpacked her things in silence, a notebook, a water bottle, a photo of her mom, a small potted succulent. As she plugged in her laptop, She noticed something small tucked beneath the monitor stand. A folded sticky note. She opened it. "We see you. Don't stop walking. HR." No name, no signature. But something in the handwriting told her it wasn't just formal support. Someone, maybe Marla, had left it on purpose. Still, it didn't erase the tension. At the morning stand-up, she introduced herself quietly. "Ava Carter, Junior Systems Analyst, happy to be here." A few nodded. One person, Jordan from the back-end optimization group, murmured a polite, "Welcome." But the silence afterward was louder than the greeting. Lunchtime came. Everyone scattered in pairs or groups. Ava sat at her desk, scrolling through onboarding documents and nibbling on a peanut butter sandwich she'd packed from home. No invitations, no small talk. She didn't expect any. By 3 p.m., her head ached from the screen, but she kept at it, debugging a training data set, triple-checking syntax, annotating variables. She wanted her work to speak first. Loudly, clearly, but quietly it was exhausting. At 5:12 p.m., most of the floor had cleared. Ava stood to stretch and gather her things when Ethan, no, Jack, appeared near her desk. He didn't say much, just smiled. "You made it through the first day." "I survived," she replied softly, then offered a slight smile, which some days is all that counts. Jack paused. "There's a meeting in conference room D tomorrow, part of our internal mentorship program. It's low-key, brown bag lunch, no pressure, but I think you might like it." Ava blinked. "Is it for restart hires?" He shook his head. "It's for anyone building something new." She nodded once. "I'll think about it." He didn't push, just smiled again and turned away. The next day she went, not because she felt ready, but because something in her whispered that she needed to be seen. Conference room D surprised her. It wasn't formal, no suits, just about 15 people sitting in a wide circle, some newer hires, some mid-level leads, a few execs observing from the edges. Jack stood near the back, listening more than speaking. Someone passed her a sandwich. Someone else offered a spot next to them. They introduced themselves, not with job titles, but with stories. One had overcome cancer. Another had returned to tech after a long hiatus raising kids. A third had once filed bankruptcy after a failed startup. It wasn't about brokenness, it was about rebuilding. By the end of the session, Ava had 3 Slack usernames saved in her phone, 2 offers to grab coffee next week, and a second sticky note passed her way that simply read, "Glad you're here." When she returned to her desk, she found something else waiting. A box, small, wrapped in plain brown paper. Inside was a leather-bound journal. Embossed on the cover in silver letters were 5 simple words. "From fall to flight." There was no sender name, but tucked into the first page was a note. "Every comeback begins with one person who keeps walking. Welcome to your flight." Ava smiled, her first real one that week. Not because things were easy now, but because she finally believed they could get better. 2 weeks had passed since Ava Carter's quiet arrival at Stratus Dynamics, and though she had begun to find a rhythm, logging early hours, cleaning up messy data sets, completing onboarding tasks faster than expected, the whispers still lingered. In team meetings, her ideas were acknowledged but not echoed. In casual hallway chats, she was often greeted with silence rather than eye contact. Some coworkers were polite but guarded. Others remained flatly indifferent. There was no open hostility, but no warmth either. It wasn't that they didn't know who she was. It was that they did. Ava wasn't naive. She knew stories had circulated. The hiring committee had spoken to leadership. HR had likely briefed team leads. Maybe they didn't know the full details, but they knew enough former convict, financial fraud, restart initiative. It wasn't her resume they distrusted. It was her past. Still, she showed up every day, punctual, prepared, professional. She stayed late, double-checked her work, and quietly offered help to those who needed it, though few accepted. Her desk stayed tidy. Her posture stayed upright. But her shoulders were getting heavy. On a rainy Thursday night just past 10 p.m., Ava remained one of the last employees on the 5th floor. Her screen glowed dimly in the near-dark room, surrounded by empty chairs and the soft hum of ceiling lights. The rain tapped gently on the high glass windows, like a metronome marking time. She was preparing a systems reconciliation proposal. her first opportunity to contribute to a real active project. She'd reviewed the specs 5 times, rebuilt the visual logic board twice. Her eyes burned from the strain. 5 more minutes, she whispered, rubbing her temples. Just 5. She didn't notice her eyelids slipping, didn't realize her breathing had softened. Her head slowly lowered to rest on her folded arms, and sleep took her. Across the city, Jack Ryland had just left a dinner with late investors. His briefcase felt heavier than usual, stacked with performance reports and compliance memos. He returned to the office only because he had forgotten his tablet charger. But as the elevator doors opened on the 5th floor, he paused. A single desk light was still on. He walked softly across the carpeted floor, and there she was, Ava Carter, fast asleep at her desk, her body curled slightly, a pen still loose in one hand. Her coat lay draped across the back of her chair. Her face, softened by rest, carried a faint crease between her brows, as if she had fallen asleep mid-thought, worrying about something she couldn't fix. Jack didn't speak, didn't move loudly. He simply looked at her, something quiet and unexpected tightening in his chest. This wasn't pity. It wasn't admiration. It was something else, something older, deeper. It was recognition. In her fatigue, in her discipline, in the way she fell asleep, surrounded by work no one had asked her to finish, he saw someone who still felt she had to prove she belonged. Every hour, every day. He reached for his coat and without a sound draped it gently over her shoulders. She stirred faintly but didn't wake. Then he disappeared into the break room and returned with a paper cup, still warm, chamomile tea. He placed it quietly beside her keyboard and sat in the chair across from her. No words, just presence, just her and him and the rain tapping faintly outside. After several minutes, Ava stirred again. Slowly, her eyes blinked open. Her hand brushed the collar of the coat now resting on her shoulders. She sat up, blinking into the dim light. Her eyes darted to the tea, then to the figure seated across from her. "Oh my God," she gasped. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to fall asleep." Jack raised his hand gently. "It's all right. You needed the rest." She looked down, suddenly self-conscious. "I was just reviewing the reconciliation notes. I didn't want to fall behind." "You're not behind," he said softly. "You're 2 steps ahead." Ava smoothed her hair, cheeks flushed. "Thank you for the tea and the coat." Jack gave a small smile. "You'd do the same." They sat there for a moment, an unexpected stillness filling the space between them. Not uncomfortable, just true. Then Jack stood and glanced toward the door. "Come on, I'll drive you home." They drove through the city in silence. Jazz played low through the stereo, the car smelling faintly of cedar wood and something warmer, like cinnamon. Ava sat with her hands folded in her lap, glancing occasionally at the skyline. Her body ached from fatigue, but the quiet comfort beside her made the exhaustion feel safer. "You can rest," Jack said, his voice barely above the music. "We've got a while." She nodded but didn't reply. 10 minutes later, her head gently tilted toward the window. Her eyes fluttered closed, and she slept. Jack glanced at her briefly. The streetlights lit her face in soft gold. A strand of hair had slipped loose, resting across her cheek. His hand moved slightly, then paused. He wanted to brush it away, not to wake her, not to intrude, but because she had become someone he didn't want the world to bruise again. Before he could act, her eyes opened. They both froze. Ava blinked slowly. Sitting up, "Sorry, I didn't mean to fall asleep again." He smiled gently. "Your hair just got in your face." She nodded, cheeks pink. "Right." Neither said another word, but neither could quiet the sudden thrum in their chests. Outside her apartment, he walked her to the front door. The rain had stopped. The sky was starting to clear. "Thank you," she said softly, "for the ride and the tea and everything." Jack looked at her, his voice low. "You've earned it." She paused, then opened the door and stepped inside. He watched her silhouette pass by the window, one light turning on behind sheer curtains. And even though the street was empty and the night quiet, neither of them slept much. 3 months had passed since Ava Carter began working at Stratus Dynamics. In that time, she'd built a reputation. Not for being the restart hire, not for her past, but for her work. She had streamlined a broken data audit protocol that saved the firm over 120 man-hours per month. Her solution had been clean, efficient, and so quietly elegant that even Neil Archer, the once skeptical head of development, had given her a rare nod of approval. But despite her professional wins, Ava still felt the silent distance in some corners of the office. She was respected. She was tolerated. She was not quite embraced. That began to change with a single email. Subject line: internal culture session. We'd love for you to speak. From Marla Quinn, HR Director. Ava stared at the screen, rereading it twice. The message invited her to serve as a keynote speaker at the upcoming internal workshop on company culture and resilience. There would be no slides, no teleprompter, just her voice and a room full of colleagues. She considered deleting it. Who wanted to hear her story? The cursor hovered over the reply button. Her fingers shook. She was about to type a polite decline when a folded slip of paper slid onto her desk. She looked up. Jack was walking away without a word, leaving only the note behind. She opened it. Your voice is already louder than your past. Use it. That night, Ava didn't sleep much, but by morning, she had written nothing. No speech, no talking points. She would speak the only way she knew how. The company's largest conference room filled quickly. No mandatory attendance, no incentives. But people came anyway. Curiosity, perhaps, or something deeper. Some stood along the walls. Some sat in the aisles. Jack stood at the back, arms crossed, eyes steady. Ava walked to the front of the room alone. No introduction, no cue. Just her. She took a breath, then spoke. Not long ago, she began. The only label people saw on me was ex-convict. No one asked why. No one asked what happened. And no one asked who I was before, or who I could be after. The room stilled. I applied to dozens of jobs. Most ignored me. Some replied with templated rejections. A few interviewed me. None hired me. Until this place. I didn't walk in here with a flawless resume or fancy credentials. I came with a past that most people run from, and I expected to be pushed out for it. She glanced around the room. Instead, someone saw me. Her eyes landed on Jack for a fleeting second, then back to the crowd. I'm not here because I was saved. I'm here because someone chose to believe I was more than my worst day. Murmurs rippled through the room, and because of that, because of a sandwich and a second chance, I get to stand here, not as a symbol, not as a project, but as a person. There was no applause. Not yet, but the silence said more than noise ever could. She smiled quieter now. Redemption isn't about being perfect. It's about being seen. It's about someone deciding you're worth the risk, and you deciding to rise to meet that risk every single day. The first clap came from the back, then another, then the entire room. And not just polite applause, real, resonant, raw. People stood, people wiped eyes, people felt it. After the session, a line formed. Co-workers, department heads, junior staff. One offered a sticky note that read, "Thank you for saying what so many of us never dared to." Another whispered, "I've been there too." She shook hands. She hugged someone who couldn't speak through tears. One woman simply touched her hand and nodded. Jack never came forward. He didn't have to. He had already done the only thing she needed. He had given her the floor, and for the first time in years, Ava stood on it. Not quietly, not nervously, but firmly, powerfully, on her own. A full year had passed. The offices of Stratus Dynamics looked the same on the surface. Same steel frames, same glass walls, same digital dashboards humming in every meeting room. But under the surface, something had shifted. And at the center of that shift stood Ava Carter. No longer just a junior analyst, no longer the hesitant new hire. She was now the face of a quiet revolution. At a national leadership conference in Washington, D.C., the ballroom buzzed with anticipation. Executives, culture, consultants, HR leads, and innovators from across the country filled the rows. The banner above the stage read, "Second Win Stories that shifted the corporate landscape." Below it in crisp print was Ava's photo. Her eyes held the same gentleness they always had. But now they also carried something new: gravity, presence. A voice introduced her. Please welcome the woman whose courage sparked one of the most progressive hiring reforms in the tech industry, Ava Carter. The applause that followed was thunderous. Ava stepped onto the stage in a slate blue dress, her hair pulled back in a simple braid. No podium in front of her. no script in her hand. Just her story, just her truth. I used to believe that in order to redeem yourself, she began, you had to do something extraordinary, that you had to be spotless to be forgiven. That perfection was the price for a second chance. She paused, but I was wrong. The room listened, leaned in. Redemption doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from being honest, from standing in the light and saying, this is who I was, but this is who I choose to be now. She scanned the crowd. The only thing that gave me a future was someone who decided my past didn't have to be the end of my story. She smiled softly. He wasn't wearing a suit that day, just a windbreaker. Holding an empty lunch bag, I didn't know who he was. I just knew he looked like he needed something. There was a ripple of knowing laughter. I gave him a sandwich. That's all I had. Turns out, it was enough. More laughter now warm and familiar. You don't need to be rich to change someone's life. You don't need power or perfection. You just need to believe that people are worth more than their mistakes. She closed with a whisper that still carried. I wasn't saved by policy. I was seen by a person. The room erupted, not out of obligation, not because of her title, but because they understood something, deeply. As the crowd dispersed, Ava stepped outside the venue through a side door. The sky had turned peach pink with the fading sun. A soft spring breeze curled through the trees, and under one of those trees stood Jack Rylan. He hadn't attended the event in the front rows, hadn't asked for a seat on stage, but he had been there all along, just watching, always watching. As she approached, his smile broke slowly. You were incredible, he said. Ava shrugged, eyes shimmering. I said what was true. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She recognized it instantly. The note from the journal he had given her months ago. Every comeback begins with one person who keeps walking. Ava touched the words gently. I still have the journal, she said. Page 1 is full now. Jack's voice softened. I've watched you change this place. Change people, including me. Ava blinked, surprised. He continued. I never told you, but before that day, I was ready to walk away. From all of this, I didn't believe in what I was leading anymore. She looked at him, lips parting slightly. And then you helped me, he said, when you didn't have to. That moment changed everything. She smiled through quiet tears. I didn't have anything that day, she whispered. Just a sandwich? Jack stepped closer, his voice low and sure. But I guess he said it was enough. Then, without dramatics, without pretense, he said the words he'd been carrying quietly for a long time. Ava, I'm in love with you. Ava's breath caught. The noise of the world, the doubts, the scars, the fear, faded away. She nodded, voice barely audible. Me too. They didn't kiss, didn't need to. They simply walked away together, hand in hand, beneath the soft breath of a spring sky. No audience, no spotlight, just two people finally aligned. And somewhere in that quiet, Jack thought of the first moment, rainfall, concrete, a sandwich, and marveled at how small kindness can carry the weight of transformation. Some stories are about meteoric rises or fairy tale endings. But Ava Carter's story, like so many that matter, is about something quieter, something deeper. It's about a woman who lost everything, not through recklessness, but through misplaced trust, and who, after years of rejection, grief, and invisible battles, chose not to stay bitter, not to give up, but to keep walking. She didn't shout for attention. She didn't demand a second chance. She gave one to a stranger in the rain with a sandwich bought from her last few dollars. And that small act echoed. It reached a man who'd lost faith in people. It reached a company that had forgotten the human behind the resume. It reached a culture hardened by perfectionism, reminding everyone that resilience isn't built in spotless rooms. It's forged in the mess of real life. Ava didn't just find redemption. She became a reason others believed it was possible. As you step away from this story, ask yourself, who in your life needs a second chance? Who might be quietly fighting a battle you don't see? And what kindness might you offer, even something small, that could become someone else's turning point? Because sometimes all it takes is one sandwich, one moment, one person who dares to believe in something better. And if you've ever been that person, or needed that person, then you already understand. Every comeback begins with one step forward, and the courage not to look back. Thank you for walking this journey with us. If this story stirred something in you, share it, let it ripple, Let someone else know that they are not their worst chapter, and that hope still lives in the smallest, quietest acts of love. You are seen. You are valued. Keep walking.